So it is 6:30, and thank you for coming, everybody. We'll get rolling in just a second. Just to let everyone know that we are recording this, but as you can see with the webinar, you are not being recorded. You are just here and watching, so there's no chance of us taking videos of you doing different things. You're just, you're just a part of the audience, and we're so grateful for you being here. So I'm Shannon Kaniman, and I'm the program coordinator here at Southborough Youth and Family Services. And Southborough Youth and Family Services, it's a department of the town of Southborough, and we provide mental health support as well as social services to the community, all at no cost. So for mental health services, we have 2 licensed mental health counselors who are on staff who can help out with folks. And they can do everything from counseling to assessments to referrals. So lots of nice things that we're able to provide to the community. We do need-based services to anyone that's living in town who are experiencing financial hardships. And we do prevention programs, and that's kind of my wheelhouse and part of what we're doing tonight when we're having Donna here tonight. So anything that has to do with mental health, with substance use prevention and misuse, doing lots of talks and webinars and workshops. So one way to find out about what we're up to is to follow us on Facebook to get our emails. And what I'm going to do while Donna's talking is that I will put in the chat, I think I can do this, a link to our website. I'll put a link to where Donna comes from. And you can check that out on at your leisure. So we are grateful tonight to have Donna Shea with us through the generous support of the Southborough Community Fund. So I am going to read a little bit about Donna before I pass it over to her. So we're really excited to talk about parenting the A+ child tonight and learn about what those A's mean. And it's probably something that everyone can kind of connect with, which I think is one of the awesome things about Donna, is that as a parent, every time that I hear her, there's something that resonates, and it's been that way for years for me, and my kids are 12 and 15 years old. So Donna, I'm going to read this out loud. So Donna Shea is the founder of the Peter Pan Center, which is a social, and she's the founder of the Peter Pan Center, and she is a social educator holding a degree in behavioral science from Lesley University in Cambridge, Mass. Since opening Peter Pan Center in 2002, she's worked to address the needs of children who are struggling with behavior and social challenges. She brings 36 years of life experience to her work as the parent of 2 sons with ADHD, anxiety, and sensory challenges, and is now in a private practice and facilitating programs in Boxborough, Massachusetts. So Donna is a consultant to schools, parent groups, and human service agencies. She's a seasoned public speaker and offers parent workshops and professional development programs, both in person and virtually, like you are tonight. She has certification in bullying prevention through the Massachusetts Aggression Reduction Center. And Donna holds certifications in positive psychology, cognitive behavioral coaching, and pathological demand avoidance. Donna is the co-author of How to Make and Keep Friends, a series of social emotional books and workshops. So without further ado, welcome, Donna.
Thanks for having me. It's so fun collaborating with you again.
Yes.
Yes, it's been a while we've worked together, so it's great.
Yep.
So thanks for everyone for being here. As I said, as some of us were coming in, that Zoom has such phenomenal benefits to it. We're all home, we're in our slippers, we're nice and warm, we don't have to run around in traffic. The challenging part is I don't have the same interaction as I would with you in person. But we are going to leave some time for questions, and Shannon will let me know if there's any questions that you want to put in the chat to stop me along the way as we're going here. So these end up being kind of a lecture type, webinar thing, but please feel free to chime in, ask a question, and we'll take it from there. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen. It worked earlier. And all right. Can everybody see the screen?
I think you're good. I can see it.
Good, you can see it. So Shannon, if you can see it, I'm going to make the assumption everyone's good.
Thank
All
you.
right. So tonight we're here to talk about A+ children. And all of us as parents probably come across one or more of these areas with our kids during the course of any given day or any given week. Shannon did a wonderful job introducing me, so I'll just skip that. So A+ personalities are awesome. There isn't a kid on this planet that we don't think is completely awesome. Some of our friends or some of our kids come with this little extra, what I call a plus. And these are the kids that typically end up in a program here at the Peter Pan Center, or you might be searching out resources with Shannon. These are the kids that bring a little extra to your parenting that may cause some struggles, may cause some challenges for them and for you. First off, we'll talk about anxiety, and I'm going to do a little bit of a presentation on each of these areas as we go along. We're going to talk about children who have trouble managing their anger or their angry emotions. Children who avoid doing what they're supposed to be doing. You can say to yourself, like, why won't my kid just do what they need to do? The awkward children, the kiddos that are struggling a little bit with the social piece of life and blending in with their classmates or making friends at school. And then we'll also spend a little time on the really active kids or the kids who are looking for a lot of attention or really just need a lot of attention. So those are the 5 types of A+ kiddos we'll be discussing. And we're going to start with anxiety first, because personally, I feel that anxiety is probably the biggest reason that we have challenges with kids, or biggest reason why kids are showing us some behaviors that we either don't understand why they're doing it, or maybe we never thought about that anxiety might be the thing that's playing into certain things. So some of the signs that your child may be experiencing some anxiety include being tense or becoming upset very easily. They might respond to something that another child might very simply let roll, but your kid gets real upset. They may look for a lot of reassurance from you. Kids that I work with really prefer being around adults. They'll seek out adults, and adults are supposed to be boring. So if your child prefers interactions with adults, that's a sign that something isn't going well, or they're looking for something that they're not able to do for themselves. They might avoid participating in activities, even ones that they would enjoy or that that they would love. Some kids become quiet and very withdrawn. Some kids even become what is known as selective mutism, which is refusing to talk anywhere but at home or with someone that they know really, really well. You may find an anxious child is overeager to please, and they're very worried about making mistakes, and they want to be perfect. Anxious kids also, and this is probably the most common one that you will see, stomach aches, headaches, somatic symptoms. So this is the kid that gets to know the school nurse really well. They might misbehave, especially in novel situations or situations where they're uncomfortable, or they might misbehave during transitions when you need them to stop doing one thing and do another thing. And they can be defiant or inflexible or seem that way. They can seem to be very rigid and they want to control people and situations. Because anxiety is an element of our personalities that really feels out of control. And so it struggles very hard to control whatever it can. So this is not all of the things that anxious kids do, but it's a good picture of some of the things that you can look for in your own child to see if any of this is going on. And then we might want to question whether or not your child is more anxious than the average kid. We want to take a look around at the environment. If we know a child is experiencing some anxiety, these are some other things that can really add to it. Have there been major changes in your life? Like, have you just moved to a new house? Is there a new baby, a new sibling in the family? Has grandma moved in? So these things, while we don't think have a lot of impact, they actually very well might. Has there been a significant loss or death in your family or close to the child? Is there a divorce happening, or is there some added tension in the home for whatever reason? Maybe your child could be in some sort of a situation at school where there's somebody not being nice or somebody being mean and they're not telling you about it. Or maybe you do know about it and don't know what to do about it. Or maybe your child has some self-esteem issues related to school, or just kind of generally, some kids come with a little bit more self-doubt, uh, what I call junk talk. They don't feel like, they're failing at everything, or if they make a mistake, they get really down on themselves and really hard on themselves. The other question we really should take a look at too is, are we passing along our own fears to kids? There are many times that I can observe that happening out in my driveway at drop off or pickup, or in discussions that I'm having with parents and kids, is sometimes the anxiety isn't so much the kids as it is our kind of taking the things that we worry about and voicing them, or just even the vibe of it. Kids can pick up. They're really good barometers for that stuff. One of the things you don't want to do with somebody who's anxious or upset is to tell them to calm down. We do use that with kids, and it really will backfire because no one has ever calmed down just by being told to. And it's not helping because we're not really listening. We're just telling the kid to stop having their feeling. And when we do that, usually the feeling just gets bigger and worse. One of the things that I have found helpful in explaining anxiety to a kid is using this sort of brain science model, where talking about anxiety is a thing that happens all inside our brain. And in the middle, there's three places in our brain that contribute to what's going on. So the first one is the prefrontal cortex. And that's the part of our brain where the executive functions happen. That's the part of the brain where we use our logic and we solve a problem and we can talk ourselves down from something, or we can say, we'll go with plan B, or this isn't as scary as it seems to be. That's that part of the brain. The next part of the brain is the hippocampus. And that's our filing cabinet that stores all of the information that we have. And then in the middle of our brain is this little tiny place called the amygdala. And the amygdala is where all our feelings and reactions occur. So what happens with anxiety is that sometimes the amygdala sends a message that's false. It sends like something's really dangerous and it hijacks the brain. So for example, a kid who has trouble with timed tests, when the teacher says, I'm going to turn on the timer, the amygdala sends a false, oh my gosh, this is dangerous, I'll never be able to do it, and hijacks the brain. Or there could be a memory in the hippocampus of a dog that chased a little one time and scared your little one. And then from there on out, we have an intense fear of dogs because every time we see one, it pulls up that memory from the hippocampus and triggers the amygdala. Right? So the amygdala will actually hijack the brain. And that's what I say to the kids. It takes right over. And then what happens is it blocks any information from getting to our prefrontal cortex. Another example of how this works is, say you're going to cross the street And we need our amygdala for this type of a situation. You're going across the street, cars coming along, and your amygdala makes you jump back so that you don't get hit by that car. You don't want your prefrontal cortex to be looking at the car going, geez, I wonder how fast it's going. What color is it? You need your amygdala to fire off properly. So it's an important part of our brain that kids need to know serves a purpose. So when the amygdala though fires wrong, then it locks up between the prefrontal cortex and everything stops talking. And then what happens is you get one of three reactions. You fight, which really looks behavioral. You flee, which is the kid who's bolting, or you freeze, right? And this is the kid that just stands there and maybe isn't able to do anything. A really simple way to show this to kids is with your hand. And so, and I'm not sure if everybody can see me with the PowerPoint going on, but my thumb's in the middle of my palm and my fingers are over it. And so if my thumb is my amygdala and the fingers are my prefrontal cortex, I'm doing good. Everything's connected and talking. If my amygdala fires off, I flip my lid and now there's no connection here. And so what we need to do with anxious kids is strategies to get our connections going again so that we can reason and we can think about it and we can calm down, which is where we need to be. So there's before I go into like how to help that, these are just, I'm not going to read you the whole list. Shannon, what I will do for you is send you the whole PowerPoint if you like, and then you're welcome to email it to everybody who attended.
Oh,
So,
that's great.
yeah, so these are just some of the things that kids worry about: testing, other kids not being nice. You get the kids who are worried about fire drills, public restrooms can be a big deal. If you got kids that are a little bit older, we're getting into the social media, the fear of missing out on stuff. And so this is not a be all end all list of things that kids worry about, but a good kind of cross cut of it. So what do we do? Or how does anxiety feel? Again, not going to read you the whole thing, but this is a million things that can happen when your body feels anxious. And some of them you might not think of, like yawning or sleepiness. Irritability goes along with anxiety much more than you would think. People can get really snappy, really irritable. Kids can feel like they're smothered. They can feel claustrophobic. You can have stomach issues. So many kids end up in the nurse's office or going through medical testing around a lot of this stomach stuff, and just to find out that it isn't really anything physical. It's what the amygdala is doing. And why it all feels like physical symptoms is because it causes all of these cortisone chemical. I don't even know the science around what it causes. But when all that stuff is happening in your body and that fight or flight is going on, these are all the sensations that stuff floating around in your body can cause. So what do we want to do to help our anxious kids? We want to help them cope with things. We want to help them use their frontal lobe to overcome what their amygdala is telling them or teaching them. And we want to ask, one of the ways we can do this is ask your child these questions. So say that your child knows that they're going to have a timed test, and that's just an easy example. Well, what's the worst thing that could happen, right? The worst thing that could happen is you fail the test, right? That's absolutely the worst thing that could possibly happen. The best thing that could happen is that you do well on the test and it was no big deal. And then you can ask, well, what is the most likely thing to happen? The most likely thing to happen is you're probably going to get nervous and get stuck. And maybe you might need to ask for help from your teacher or walk through these scenarios of different things that might be likely to happen or something that your child can do to help solve the problem. I did this with a kid who wanted to ask a girl on a date. So he was a teenager. And I said, okay, so what's the worst thing that could happen if you ask her out on a date? Well, she could say no. Correct. Say, what's the best thing that could happen? She could say yes, and we have a really good time. I said, what is the most likely thing to happen? He said, well, she'll probably say yes because I know her fairly well. And then we'll go out and we'll have a date and then we'll see what happens. So best case, worst case. And I do this with with all kinds of kids about all kinds of scenarios. I do it with my mom too, who's struggling with some physical things. Mom, what's the best thing that can happen if we do this? What's the worst thing that can happen? What's the most likely thing? This is my favorite strategy for helping your kid or yourself or anyone through an anxiety moment. Okay, so it's called grounding, and how that works. I'm going to do that first. So how grounding works is what you want to do. Remember, we're stuck in our amygdala, and we need to get back to our frontal lobe. So what you want to do is ask your child, you know what, Mary, tell me 5 things that you can see right now. And what Mary should do is she'll look around. She goes, "Well, I can see the printer. I can see the wind chime out my porch window. I can see this little figure. I can see my computer, and I can see my juice." All right, great. Tell me 4 things that you can feel right now. I can feel the blanket on my legs. I can feel the sleeve of my shirt. I can feel a little itch, and I can feel my feet on the floor. 3 things you can hear. I can hear the movie that my spouse is watching in the other room. I can hear myself talking, and I can hear the heat coming on in the house. 2 things you can smell. And if I can't smell anything, or if a child can't smell anything, what you want to say, tell me 2 of your favorites. So I might say bread that's baking and rose scented candles. And then 1 thing you can taste. And again, if you can't taste anything, what's one of your favorites? Oh, chocolate cake. Now, what we just did there is got the kid to stop their amygdala and start thinking. And so you have to think in order to be able to go through this grounding exercise. And we use our senses to help us do it as well. And you can do it for yourself. I talked to my older son through this once. He was caught in a traffic jam on his way to work, was running low on gas, was having a bad day, and just was having a panic. He called me. He was in the middle of a panic attack, and he was very irritable about it on top of it. So I said, before we can do anything, let's do this. So I ran him through it, and I had to run him through it twice. You can do it more than once. And by the time we got finished with it, he was in a place where I could say, all right, let's think it through. What can happen? So have you called work yet to let them know? Okay, call work, tell them you're stuck. If you run out of gas, remember we have AAA. If you don't have your card, I can send you a picture. And so by the time we were done, he was better and able to solve the problem. But when a child or anyone is in the midst of a panic moment, they don't have that ability to reason. So when your child is melting down like this, or screaming and crying and really stuck, it's because they really can't, because they're stuck in their amygdala. Another strategy, and some kids tell me that they like to do the breathing and they don't like to, some don't. But when you do try to have a child breathe, or you're trying to use your own measured breathing to calm yourself down, use different numbers, like 6 in, hold 4, 8 out. You can use any number. What you want to do is count, because when you're counting, you are again using your prefrontal cortex and not the amygdala. The other quick thing that I've used with kids to help them through a panicky moment is to pop the thought. So kids having a really hard time, maybe having a meltdown, I might say something like really off the wall, like, "Hey, why do giraffes have long necks? Do you know?" Or something to the effect of, "Hey, is an avocado a fruit or vegetable?" And the goal of that is to have your kiddo look at you and go, "Well, I don't know." Even if they're just looking at you like, "Why are you asking me that?" Now we've popped them back into that prefrontal cortex, and that's where we can help them. Okay. So I think the best advice is to watch for amygdala moments and amygdala hijacks. And remember, there's not a whole lot you can do until you get them connected again. And grounding is probably the best way to do that. Anxious kids tend to be not as optimistic as the average Joe. And so sometimes you'll see them feeling a little bit down on things, or not looking for the stuff that's good and worrying about all the stuff that's bad or potentially bad. one of the ways to, and this is from positive psychology, one of the ways that you can actually train your brain to be more optimistic or help your child train their brain to be more positive is to do a 3 good things a day journal. So you want to have a notebook, let your kid pick it out to write in. And what you're going to write in that or draw is 3 good things that happened that day and why they were good. Because the why is what cements the positive thought. And the science behind positive psychology has shown that if your child or you do this for every day for a week, you're going to see a bump in optimism. And if you continue to do this on an ongoing basis, you will actually rewire your brain to have a more positive outlook. It is a proven intervention. The people who have studied positive psychology have used this with PTSD, military personnel. And again, we're trying to train kids to look for the good things that are going on in their life rather than all the things to worry about. So a journal can be super helpful for that. Another thing that you may want to have handy for a kid who struggles with anxiety is a calming kit. Now, your calming kit for your child is going to look, as unique as your child is, as as individual as your child is. These are some suggestions. Again, I'll send it out to Shannon. Whatever would work, and it could be a little backpack that you carry around with you wherever they need it. Maybe they can have a few things, work with their teacher, have a few things in their cubby at school. Some of these things can be written into if your child's on some sort of IEP. Maybe some of these things like being able to have the snack or chewing gum or something with them to calm down. So talk to your child, or maybe, well, that your child better than anybody else. Look for things that soothe them. And that's the thing that you want to put into this calming kit for them. All right, I'm going to take a sip and then we're going to go on to avoidance. Because of course, all of our kids do everything we ask them to do all the time without question or fighting us, correct? I wish. So avoidance. Kids might use this kind of behavior to not do things they don't want to do, such as getting ready for school or bed or doing their homework. One of the first questions we want to ask when a kid is avoiding doing something and avoiding it like the plague, is it that the child can't do it, or is it the child won't do it? And it's tricky because sometimes if a child can't do it long enough, they won't even try anymore. And sometimes the kid will tell us that they can't do it when they really can. And so you as their parent have to figure out and test out, is it something that my child really can't do? So if your child has a writing disability and we don't know it, and you were asking them to write a 5-paragraph essay, that's a can't, but it can seem very much like a won't. Then you even get into that grayish, fuzziest place where a child can't sometimes, but can other times. And then it looks like a won't, but they really can't just at that time. This is especially true of kids with ADHD. If things are firing right and they're really motivated and they like the topic, of course they're going to be able to do it. If they don't, and it's a non-preferred, non-motivating task, then it becomes a can't. And it's tricky because it looks like a won't. I'd like to have you think, or encourage you to think, instead of the behavior or what your child's giving you a hard time about, think about it in terms of what is my child having difficulty doing in this moment. So I'll go to the tantrums in a second. So that might look like if your child is not getting ready for bed, you could rephrase that in your mind of, my child is having difficulty in following the nighttime routine. Or my child won't get started on their homework. Geez, my child is having some difficulty getting their stuff organized so that they can do their homework this afternoon. It's the same thing, but it's the way we as parents think about it. And if we think about it this way, we're going to approach it from more of a supportive, problem-solving way rather than approaching it in a punitive, discipline, get on their back kind of way. So think about that. What is my kid having difficulty doing right now? Anytime that you notice some sort of misbehavior. Kids use tantrums to avoid doing things that, that's kind of like since the dawn of man, kids will throw a tantrum to get what they want or get out of doing what they don't want to do. So there's two very distinct types of tantrums, and we actually have to come at them two very different ways. So, an emotional tantrum is when your child has been completely overwhelmed. They could be they're hungry, they're tired, they've had a long day, they don't feel good. These are all of the things that, perfect example, you're driving home from Six Flags, it's 95 degrees, no one has eaten, everyone's tired, and everyone's losing it. That's an emotional tantrum. Emotional tantrums, we want to soothe. We will have some form of compassion for the child, like, oh, bud, you must be hungry, or can I get you a snack, or whatever it is. We want to take care of those. A manipulative tantrum is the kind of tantrum that a child throws on purpose to get out of doing something or to get something that they want. I had a little friend here at Peter Pan, and he had a tantrum. He wanted a toy that somebody else was playing with. I told him that when it was available, he'd be able to have it. He came over, he wrapped his hands around me, dug his face into me, and he started having this tantrum. And he'd look up at me, and when I wouldn't pay any attention to it, he'd start screaming again. And this went on for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. And I'm like, dude, this is called a tantrum and it doesn't work with me. So the key to manipulative tantrums is to not let them work and not give it a whole lot of energy or attention. There's a strategy called planned ignoring that you want to use with these, and not let your child work you. And I see that unfortunately, unfortunately, when you give into a manipulative tantrum, at any point, you've just created more manipulative tantrums. Because if it works, a kid decides, oh, this is a tool that works. If I do this, then I don't have to do this. Or if I do this, then mom's going to give in because I'm going to wear her out. They will wear you out. And you really only have to stand your ground a few times before a child really does get the message that you're not going to give in to these anymore. So we don't want to debate them. And in terms of avoidance behaviors, if your child is complaining oh, I spelled that wrong. If your child is complaining, but doing what you said, you won that battle. So if you said, I want you to go pick up all the laundry and put it in the laundry basket, and your kid is, but they're doing it, don't talk anymore. Okay, you won that round, and you just want, especially if it's a preteen or a teenager, they're going to complain and they're going to mumble and they're going to say rotten things under their breath or even out loud. But if your child is complying, just let them go ahead and finish doing what you want them to do. There are kids that avoid new situations or avoid doing new things. So the strategy I would give you for that is to talk about time. So I say to kids, 20 seconds is all you need to try to do something new. 20 seconds of bravery is all you need to give it a shot. And if you don't like it after 20 seconds, then you don't have to do it anymore. I've had many kids come back to me and say, I used 20 seconds of bravery at my horseback riding lesson, or I used it at skiing and I did this new thing that my ski instructor wanted me to try. You could also say, I'd like you to try one new thing, one time, for just 1 minute. What we're trying to do here is give the anxious child some control. Because remember, anxiety wants to control everything. And when you put a time parameter around it, it feels much more in control. More often than not, your child will try the fun thing and try for 1 minute. And the next thing you know, they're in and they're having a wonderful time. I worked with a little girl called Grace, and I remember the kids were all doing one big activity. And she, like, I don't know if it was tag or some version of some sort of thing like that. She really wanted to play, and you could see it, and she just couldn't get through the anxiety to go in. So I said, Grace, I'll go with you and we'll just do it for 1 minute. And if you don't like it, we'll stop. I promise. And after 1 minute, she was totally in and giggling and having a great time. So and even if your child does the 1 minute, does 30 seconds, does 10 seconds, it's still getting through the block a little bit more each time. There is, before I forget to mention it, if I don't have it on a slide, there's a wonderful book. So if your child struggles with anxiety, there's a wonderful book called Growing Up Brave, and the author's name is Donna Pincus, and her last name is spelled Pincus. And it's all cognitive behavioral strategies that you can do with your child yourself at home. And it's many, many things that a therapist would suggest that you do. So it's a great book for those of you who are struggling with some of this stuff. If your child's avoiding doing things you ask them to do, could it possibly be that you're asking the wrong question? If you're asking a yes or no question and your child takes no for the option, we've set ourselves up for our child not complying with what we ask them to do. Examples. Do you want to get your homework started now? No. Do you want to put your coat on so we can get going? No. Do you want to help me carry in the groceries? No. So we set ourselves up for an argument because no wasn't really an option. We're trying to be kind and we're trying to be nice, and kids will take every opportunity to escape doing the things they don't want to do. So why give them this extra opportunity? What you want to do is change your language to short and clear directives instead. So that would be, I want you to start your homework. You're going to be starting homework in 5 minutes, so wrap up your video game. Let's get your shoes on. We're going to be leaving in a couple minutes. And I need some help carrying in the groceries now, please. You're going to get more compliance. You're not going to get 100%. You're still going to get pushback sometimes from some kids whose personality is that way, but you're going to get greater compliance. The other thing I will throw out there is we as mom, I'm going to say it's a generalization, but kind of in general, we as moms use a lot of words, too many words. For example, you need to go brush your teeth, because if you don't brush your teeth, then you're going to have a cavity, and then we're going to have to go to the dentist, and you're going to have your cavity, right? Where a dad parent type might say, teeth go now. And typically, the shorter the message, again, the more compliant you're going to get. Especially with kids who struggle with executive function and ADHD. If there's parents of you among us in the audience tonight who have that or has that, you want to make sure you have their brain and you want to make sure it's short and clear. Grandma's rule is another strategy that you can try to get kids to stop avoiding what you want them to do. And that's using grandma's rule. And that's just the language of things like as soon as or when then. Sure, as soon as your teeth are brushed, we'll read a story. Yes, when the toys are all picked up, then we'll play the game. And absolutely, as soon as you're ready for school, you can use your screen until it's time to go. So we're saying yes because kids love to say yes, and we want to say yes to our kids. But we, as the adult and the parent, also need to have our needs met. And a very important lesson for children to learn is that our needs as adults are also important and sometimes a priority. It's in you know, I'm not saying that we should do this because I think, you know, we should be disciplining all the time, but it's an important lesson that kids know that they are not always in the number one spot. For example, when it's time for kids to leave my social group, sometimes there's the kid or two that will linger and not want to leave, and everybody else is gone, and they're ignoring me, they're ignoring their parent because they don't want to go, right? Because they're having a great time. And I understand that. So I'll use empathy and I'll say, you know what? I know that you're having a really great time, but let's think about whose needs are the most important right now. And a kid might go, well, mine. And I'm like, nope, your moms are actually more important right now because she needs to get you in the car and to go home. And my needs are more important right now because I want to close up Peter Pan and go in and have my dinner. And when I use that with kids, most of the time they find that the reasonable explanation, and that it's not always about what one person wants. Sometimes it's about what another person needs. Right? Positive reinforcement. The more we catch kids doing something right, the more right things they're going to do. That is behavior theory. If we're constantly on the things they're doing wrong, if we're constantly complaining about the things we want them to do, we're not catching them doing something right. And unfortunately, it becomes sort of this circle of crud because we're paying attention to all the stuff we don't want and we're getting more of the stuff that we don't want. So when your kid does it right, tell them, hey, you know what? I noticed that you picked that stuff up without me asking you to. That was great. You know what? You waited to ask me something until I finished my phone call. That was very helpful of you. Those are the things. And it doesn't have to be prizes and stickers and all that. It can just be your verbal self doing that. Right? We get into discussion sometimes with parents about bribery versus rewards. Well, why should I have to bribe my child? Or, if you are using some sort of reward system, which, for some kids works great, for other kids, not so much. So you need to know whether or not your child responds to these, token systems, pom-pom system, because some kids do. But for the ones who don't, the verbal stuff works better. But if you're getting into, I'm going to give a reward out, which is fine. So say you earn 10 tokens, you get a half hour of screen time, whatever. That's a reward. So a reward comes after the fact. When then you, it's a reward. Okay. Bribery is, all right, you can have 10 more minutes of screen time and then I want you to. All right. Or bribery is, I want you to do this and, I'm going to take you to Starbucks and then I expect you to do this. In the grocery store, a reward would be, you're giving a kid a candy bar and you're saying, I want you to behave in the store. Here's a candy bar to do that. A reward would be, you know what? We got through the whole store. We're in the checkout. You stayed by the cart. You did all of the things that I asked you to. You can grab a candy bar off the shelf. That is the difference. Okay? Rewards don't have to be things, though. For many children, especially younger children, rewards can be just your time and your attention because they're thirsty for it. We live in a very busy world. We have lots of work things pulling at us, school things pulling at us, activity things pulling at us. So the reward of time and special things to do together can be just as motivating as a tangible toy type of a reward. All right. One of the things that you can think about, again, this goes back to, what is my child having difficulty with? He's not giving me a hard time. He's having a hard time. Granted, though, children can give you a hard time. Every child, especially, even if they have a specific need, they are perfectly capable of misbehaving on purpose. And so our job as parents is to figure out when that is. Like, is he giving me a hard time on purpose? Or is he not? Is he having one? And then one of them requires consequence and discipline, and the other one requires us understanding and supporting. Let's talk about those active kids, those attention kids, those could be known as ADHD kids who, are some of the most interesting. I mean, every child is interesting, but sometimes these ADHD kids can just bring some spice to life, which, is very cool to work with. So, attention stuff. Kids who are attention seekers or have attention challenges or have a diagnosis of ADHD can demonstrate behaviors that are annoying or frustrating to those of us around them. I used to call it ogre poking. Now I just sort of really relate it to more as self-amusement, because I'm not sure what to do with myself. So I'm going to go and try to raise the level of energy in the room. And the fastest way to do that is maybe to tease somebody a little or poke at them. So our kids who really are seeking, all of these things need to be kept very, very busy. I will get on a little soapbox that I get on every time I talk about ADHD kids, because we want to be really cognizant of not disciplining children for behaviors or trying to work with them on behaviors which are actually symptoms. So there are three main symptoms to these kids if they're diagnosed: hyperactivity, inattention, and impulsivity. Right? So not being able to focus on your work, right? Having your body in somebody else's space, not being able to sit in circle, poking somebody in line, um, not raising your hand before you answer a question. If you look at the symptoms of ADHD, that's that. So children are not demonstrating behavior, they are presenting one of their symptoms. The tricky part of this is because their symptoms look very behavioral. I want you to think about a child who has diabetes and has to manage their blood sugar, right? We don't say to the child who has diabetes, you can manage your blood sugar just by focusing harder on it. Or you can manage your blood sugar. When you manage your blood sugar 3 times this morning, then you're going to get a reward or a sticker. That's not how it works. And it's not how it works with the brain chemistry of ADHD. So what we want to do, like we would do for a child with diabetes. So if a child with diabetes, sometimes we can manage their blood sugar just with diet, right? And so what we would do for them is manage their what they eat and how often and all of that. With ADHD kids or kids who struggle with these things, we want to create a diet for them. And that diet is their accommodations to help them out. That could be the chewing of the gum. That could be a yoga band on their seat. That could be the frequent movement breaks. These are the things that we put in place to help them out. And then just like a diabetic kid, some kids need to have medication and take insulin, and same thing with ADHD kids. Sometimes it gets to the point where they can't manage their symptoms without medical help. So I just leave everybody with that thought that if your child is being, disciplined, or there's a behavior plan in place for things that are actually symptoms, that's an important discussion to have with the people who interact with your child every day. So kids get bored. So kids who are stimulation seeking little missiles will get bored easily, and they'll try to set off energy in the environment. And this could be your class clown type of kid. This could be the kid who does just, for whatever reason, seems to just do annoying things all the time. In that brain, it doesn't care if that attention and stimulation is positive or negative. It just wants the fix. And negative attention can be a very quick fix to get. Right? So when your child, or you see a child doing this attention seeking stuff, the strategy really is to turn it back around and go, I think you need my attention. Or it looks like you want Joey's attention. But how you're trying to get it, it's not working well for you or for me. So let's see if we can figure out a different way, or a more positive way to get my attention. You can go up and ask Joey, hey, Joey, I think I'd like to play with you. Or may I use that? Or Joey, because kids uh, with these challenges very much need to be taught a lot of the skills that you think come naturally: how to interact with others, how to back down when the social feedback is telling them that enough is enough. They need to be really specific with being taught that. How I do that is I encourage these kids to try to always remember, which is hard because this is their difficulty, to ask before taking any actions. May I, could I, will you, before you just take it. You could picture a kid who wants a toy that somebody else is playing with, and he just grabs it right out of their hand, which makes the other kid angry, and then a conflict happens. So, or sometimes the child, and I'll say, okay, you got to remember to ask first. So the child's asking as he's taking the toy. So we want to work through. I want you to ask. I want you to wait for the answer. And then I want you to accept the answer that you're given. Joey, may I use that? Joey says, no, I'm using it right now. All right. Hey, Bill, we're going to have to help you find something else that you can use right now. Okay. These kiddos are ready, fire, and there is no ability in the brain for aim most of the time. And that's why you find yourself so frustrated with, why is my child so impulsive? They don't have the ability to think about the action before they do it. It's not there. So what do they need? Is they need us to be their surrogate frontal lobe for them. They need us, the adult, to go, you know what? So I'll see a kid winding up to maybe throw something outside in the yard, and I'll say, hey, before you do that, let's think it all the way through to the end. And if I can help them with the aim part, sometimes they realize it's not the best thing to fire. Did you think that all the way through the end? What do you think the outcome of that is going to be? Is that the outcome that you want? Because kids who are impulsive are not thinking about that. They are not thinking about the outcome. They are only thinking about the action. When you hear kids telling other kids to stop it, or your child, stop it, John, will you just stop it? We need to help the kid who wants, we need to help identify it, because again, these kids are not reading the social feedback. They might not know, even though it's obvious to us, that Jimmy wants him to stop poking him with a pencil. Jimmy, tell Billy what you want him to stop, please. I want him to stop poking me with a pencil. All right, Billy, did you hear that? He wants you to stop poking with a pencil. So that's what you need to stop, right? Now, if Jimmy continues to poke him for the pencil and laughs and thinks it's funny, well, now Jimmy's or Billy's misbehaving on purpose. And that's where we say, all right, you're going to need to take 5 minutes away from Billy, or you're going to need to give me that pencil. That's when the consequence comes into play. When a child has had an impulsive or poor reaction to something, impulsive kids are not going to be made any less impulsive by social coaching, by thinking about it, by focus. They're impulsive. It's a symptom. What they need to learn how to do while they're trying to practice some of this aiming stuff is to learn how to back up and repair something. So we want to work backward from, you know what? I can see that you're really bummed out that you did that. And that made Jimmy mad at you, that you were poking him with a pencil. Okay. So let's work our way backwards. Like, what do you think you could have done instead of poking him with a pencil? And that's where you're teaching the skills. Or how can you go to Jimmy and say, Jimmy, man, I shouldn't have done that. And can we be friends again? So these guys need to learn how to repair things, but I also want them to learn how to repair things without becoming a constant, I'm sorry, everything I do is bad, everything I do is wrong. We want to teach them to say something like, oh, man, I didn't think. Let me help you fix that. Man, I didn't mean to say that out loud. It was just one of those dumb things that, I didn't mean. I just want to fix it. Because if we don't teach them how to repair, then they're always going to be kind of on the end of the kids not wanting to play with them. And it can be repaired. It can easily be repaired. I do it over and over again in the moment out in the yard. Oh, I think that was an accident. Was that an accident? Or were you guys arguing and it was on purpose? Oh, were you guys having a fight? No. Oh, then it was probably an accident. Yeah. Everybody okay? Good. Right. So those are the kinds of language and things that you want to do as our kids are having these little moments that we don't want to grow into big gaps between them and their peers. All right, moving on to the awkward kids, or the kids that are struggling with a little bit of trying to make some friends and keep some friends, and the social stuff is tough, and all of that. So kids who fall in awkward, and these are kids that may eventually or are currently somewhere on the autism spectrum. Children that I work with on the spectrum are very high functioning in terms of their abilities and academic abilities. Their their language abilities are pretty much in place. It's more of the social cues, social communication, motivation to even be social. Those are the kids that I'm talking about tonight. Sometimes awkward personalities have difficulty making eye contact. I think we're learning as we go and as we talk to adults who are on the spectrum. Eye contact does not need to be the big deal that we think it needs to be. An autistic kid will tell me, I can either listen to you or look at you, but I can't do both. So which one do you want? Most of the time we want them listening. These are the guys that misreads or those social cues. They have a lot of difficulty in discerning the nonverbal communication. That's actually 70% of communication is what is somebody's body language telling you. They may have some special interests or passions that are a little bit more unique than some other kids around, and have trouble finding kids that are interested in those. They can be very literal black and white thinkers, which, again, can be good, but can also get in their way if they can't find shades of gray in social interactions with kids. And very frequently, very, very smart in terms of academic IQ and their abilities in maths and science and things like that. And again, I mentioned that some of these kids will fall on the autism spectrum. So what do we do for these guys? We help them connect. We help the ADHD impulsive guy with all of that stuff to be their frontal lobe. We want to help kind of be these guys' heart, these guys' friendship people, and connect them with other kids. One of the hard lessons that kids learn, any kid learns, not just these guys, is not everyone has to be friends and wants to be friends. And sometimes kids just don't want to play with other kids. That's just the reality of life. What we want to do in that instance is help the child find someone who does want to play with them. Out in my social group, I have on Wednesdays, I have like two kind of main groups of kids who play together, and a couple from one group keeps trying to play with the other group, and they keep getting not excluded per se, but not really included per se, and the other kids are doing their thing, and these guys get really mad, and I'm like, I understand why you're really mad, but if you keep trying to bang your head against a group that doesn't want to really bring you in, what can you do instead? When someone doesn't want to play with you, yes, it hurts. But what are your options? What do you have control over? What we can also do for these kids, especially the ones that you find kind of walking the perimeter or tend to isolate and do individual activities, and you know that they're interested in socializing, is to build some games and activities around that child yourself to attract other children to them. So it doesn't work to say, go find someone to play with. I'm going to help bring them to you. There was one time I did this where there was a little guy, he was sitting at the Legos and he was building all these little things out of Legos and flying them around. And I went over, I'm like, oh, you look like you're having an awesome party in your head. Like, what's going on? He goes, oh, I'm building Angry Birds and da, 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 da. I'm like, oh, I'm going to build Angry Birds too. And when you get a grown up and a kid doing something really cool and fun, another kid's going to come over. What do you do? Oh, join our party. We're doing Angry Birds. Who else can we invite to our party? By the time I was done with that, I had 3 or 4 kids playing Lego Angry Birds with him. So another time I was doing a kitchen thing. I was playing in the kitchen set with a little girl and, doing cooking and restaurant. And the next thing you know, other kids come. And then what you do as the grown up is you remove yourself from the situation and then you let the socialization happen. That's how we start getting them to play. I have another guy right now I'm working with who I could not get him to leave the grown-up side. And I said, we're going to have to do a grown-up-ectomy on you. And he laughs. But so I found out what his passion was, which was trucks. He happened to love playing with trucks. Went out, got a bunch of trucks, put him in the playroom. and he's been playing trucks with other kids. Last week, he even initiated playing some trucks with other kids. So, kind of zeroing in on that, some of the things that they can do, some of the things that they like, some of the things that relax them. Some language around helping kids get involved and included with other kids is teach them to not to say, "Can I play with you?" Because that's one of those yes or no questions that leaves a no option open to the kids that they're trying to join in with. Say, "I'd like to play with you. What are you doing?" And if a child's been included in a, I tell kids who are like, if you go up to a group and you say, "I'd like to play with you," then it's your job now to conform. Because sometimes kids get lost in their connections or left out, or kids don't want to play because when they are included, they try to take the whole thing over, change the rules, complicate the process. So if you are joining, then you are conforming. You may make a suggestion, the other kids can say no. If you don't like how it's going, then you are more than welcome to create something that you want to do on your own, all right, and or recreate it with some other kids doing it the way that you would like to do. Instead of eye contact and things like that, I talk to kids about how fronts are friendly. So if I have two kids sitting on the floor playing Legos and their backs are to each other, I will just go over and I'll say, "Hey guys, turn around and face each other. Just put your fronts towards each other." I'm not telling them they even have to talk or converse. Um, the other thing too, I think, is we get tied up in conversation skills for kids. Kids don't converse. What they do is they play, and the conversations kind of come from that. So when a child is having, being shy or standing on the outskirts of an activity, I'll say, "You know what? This is easier than you think. All you have to do is go put your body by the kids, pick up a shovel, or start running around in the game. And I promise you, you'll be playing really soon and they'll be talking to you." So it's more of get your body in there, and then the rest of it will happen. Uh, there are so many hidden social rules, so many things that are invisible to kids. And these kids think differently. And they might not understand these hidden rules because they're very literal in how they come at things. And we want to meet them in a literal way when we can. What I say to kids is, you have a very black and white brain. My brain is more gray. So I'm going to work very hard on understanding how you think. And I would really like you to work really hard on understanding how I think. Another thing that I do with kids is to point out opinions versus fact, because everybody has opinions, but some kids, they think their perspective is the only perspective, and they don't see that other people's perspectives can be very different but still their own. So we'll play a game like, all right, like Halloween is the best holiday ever. Opinion. Halloween usually falls October 31st. Fact, right? Twinkies are the most delicious snack on the planet. Opinion. Twinkies are a yellow cake with the stuff in the middle. Fact. So kids need to know how to do that. I think kids also need to know, one of the things about social coaching, it is never my desire to change a child's unique and wonderful and awesome personality. But what social coaching does work on is how to negotiate, and the reason why we have some mandatory social conventions like manners and responding when someone asks you a question and not ignoring them, and picking up after yourself, and the pleases and the thank yous. And so many kids who have this type of brain are like, well, why do I need to do that? Why should I? What purpose does it serve? Those hidden social rules serve a purpose because they help them navigate general social situations that they're going to find themselves in at school and as an adult at work. And it's really important that they have a handle on how to use them when they need to use them. uh, we can facilitate peer interactions. again, when you have a child that's struggling, especially struggling in school, it's really important to work with your team and your teachers and your, the people that are providing services around, what do these interactions look like? How can we improve these interactions? What can we do to support my child in these things? So when we're facilitating peer interactions, I talk to kids about blending in versus sticking out. And again, I'm not trying to change you. I'm just trying to say that there's social conventions we all have to meet. If I'm in a meeting, I'm going to act in a certain way. If I'm sitting in a religious ceremony, I'm going to act in a certain way. Right. So this is just the way our culture and our society is set up. And there is room for unique and there is room for quirky, but you just have to know your time, place, and people in order to do that. A quick thing you can say to your kid to help them with these hidden social rules is I call it social matching. Let's look around where we are and let's work on matching what everyone else is doing. Is everyone sitting quietly and using a whispering voice like in a church? Is everybody quietly turning their phones off and not making a lot of noise? And we're in a movie theater. How do we match in there? How do we match each other? And we're sitting in class and we're all on the rug. What's the match? What are we supposed to be looking like? Because they're not good at reading the room and picking that up for themselves. It's helpful to help kids who struggle in some of these areas with when to change a topic. So if they have an amazing, wonderful passion that maybe is a little different from what the other kids are into, when do we change it? I call it everybody's YouTube channel because kids can really buy into YouTube because so many of them watch it. And I'll say, okay, so if you had a YouTube channel, what would be on yours? So, oh, dinosaurs and Pokemon and trains. Cool. All right, well, I'll tell you what's on mine. Mine is the books I like to read, and I do some diamond art, and I love to go line dancing. So my channel would have all those things on it. And Mary's channel has drawing, and this channel has math, and this channel has all. And when I say to a child, it's time to turn into somebody else's channel, we have an easier time switching. Like, okay, we spent enough time on the art channel. It's time to, I'm going to switch over and we're going to take a look at the dinosaur channel. It might not be our favorite channel, but because this is our friend, we're going to stay there for a little while. And I find using that YouTube analogy has made it a concrete hidden thing, right? Because we're trying to make things for these kids as concrete as we can. Another thing I use is red dots, green dots, or bubble thoughts, where some things are meant to be said, some things are meant to be held inside. A little white lie is okay, but it's still lying. Yes, yes, it is. But in order to preserve somebody's feelings, we might not want to say everything that's running through our heads. And I remember my aunt, it was a funny story. We were talking about bubble thoughts and we were on a family weekend and she didn't like my brother's girlfriend at all. And she kept saying mean things. I'm like, you know what? Those are bubble thoughts. Those are not thoughts that should be shared with the rest of us. And then she's like, oh, okay. And she was funny. She goes, I'm having a bubble thought. I'm having a bubble. I'm like, no, no, that's still breaking the bubble. And you're not supposed to tell us you're having a bubble thought. So some things are best kept to ourselves and all of us and kids need to know that blunt honesty is not always the best policy. You might lose friends and get yourself in some hot water socially that way. Another way kids get themselves in social hot water is being the rule police and tattling. So the strategy I use for that is if a kid is trying to rule police everybody, the strategy is, encouraging that kid to remember that you only have to worry about yourself. And if you're doing the right thing, then you don't need to worry about what everybody else is doing. Yes, other kids are going to break the rules. It can be very distressing. It's not your problem. Sometimes I'll say to kids, it's none your business or mind your own business, because I find that kids do well with blunter coaching, some of them, where it's like we can't dance around it. We kind of have to say, no, this one is none of your business and go off and play. Tattling, again, typically is used to get someone else in trouble, but kids who are struggling with awkwardness usually tattle because they're unsure of what to do. And so I will usually say to them, thanks for the info. I'll take it from here. Or I might work a little bit on what tattling is. And this is what it sounds like. And again, go back to, does this problem belong to you? Or does this problem belong to the kids that are not following the rules right now? All right, I think this is one of our last sections is anger. So safety comes first. Absolutely, safety comes first. So if we're emotionally dysregulated, it's perfectly okay to be mad. I think that's 100% kids need to know that angry and mad is perfectly okay. It's just a feeling, okay? But it's not okay to hurt someone, hurt yourself, bolt, damage, or break other people's property. So there are rules around this. What we want to do is give kids the tools to handle the aggression. Really what we'd like to do is to get kids to be able to catch it before it gets too high and get a break, take the break. This is really hard to learn. But when and I see this over and over again in my yard, I'll see a child self-select, take a break, go across the yard. I say to my staff, do not go over there. And I'll say to the other kids, he needs some space. It's okay. He'll come back when he's ready. I think the mistakes that we might accidentally make is when a child is trying to take that break, we keep talking and we keep trying to reason and we keep trying to fix, where we really want to just let them go blow off some steam or go, as long as they're safe and they haven't left a safe vicinity, that's what we want them to do. We want them to be able to take a break. We should give them a lot of kudos if they are able to do it. I use this gauge the rage thing here just to kind of talk about like where we can communicate with kids, where we shouldn't. So if kids between a 1 or a 2, this is where we want to teach some coping skills. How do you kind of handle this yourself? Is that taking the break? Is that getting a drink of water? Is that expressing that you're feeling really frustrated about something? For us grown-ups or for teenagers, it could be, letting off the little swear word and, that type of thing. If we're getting up to the 3, if we're starting to really kind of feel agitated and angry and we're starting to lose our cool. Now, if we get all the way to what I call freaky 5, this is where things go wrong. This is where we've lost control. This is where the reasoning skills and that amygdala also takes over for anger. So the amygdala has taken over and we are no longer a thinking, rational human. What we need to do is we can't communicate with a kid at 5, okay? They're gone, just like in the anxiety thing. You could try the grounding. I'm going to give you some other tips in a minute. If we try to do an authoritarian response at a 5 or between 3 and 4, we could just escalate it. And that's the last thing we want, is to escalate it by trying to yell at them to calm down, to put them in their, room, to take more and more things away. We're not making it any easier for them or for us. So what we want to do is teach kids the size of the problem. All right. And again, I love scales because, it's just easy to do with kids. If you're at a 1, it's no problem. I can handle it. I drop my pencil, I pick it up. That's a 1, right? 2 is a small problem, so I can use a coping thought. All right, let's see. Drop my pencil, rolled across the floor, can't really easily pick it up. What can I do about that? Oh, I can wait till after class. I can raise my hand and, go over there and ask the teacher to pick it up. I might have another pencil on my desk. Anything that I can use to problem solve. A medium problem is where I can ask for help, right? So, oh my gosh, it's band day and I left my instrument at home. That's a medium problem for a kid. It's a 3. And medium problems, I encourage kids, this is where you start to ask for help. Like, you're not handling it on your own because it's okay to ask for help. And that could be asking the band teacher if you can use one of the spare instruments that they keep. It could be asking your teacher if you can go to the office, call your mom to see if she would be willing to bring it for you. So that's where you can ask for help. Number 4 is a large problem, and usually this is where an adult needs to solve it, right? Or acceptance is required. So there's really either it's not solvable and you have to accept it. So you're planning on going to the amusement park, it's raining, you're not going. It's a big problem, we need to accept it. Or you can step in where an adult needs to take care of it. You know, somebody's, yeah, a bullying situation might be a place where that problem is big, where we need adults to take care of it for us. And I tell kids, number 5, that's if somebody is in an emergency, someone's hurt, someone's bleeding, and you know the kid. You might even have a kid that's always everything's a 5, and not everything's a 5. So feel free to print this slide out and use it with your child and talk about, is it a green one? Is it a blue one? I get different color sticky notes, and we go, okay, what? Let's say, let's see, it's snowing and I don't have my mittens. What number is that, right? That could be a ask for help problem. See if you can get something from the lost and found. So again, gauging the size of things. Now, we do have to use consequences sometimes. Because for children, like I said, are completely capable of misbehaving on purpose. No matter ADHD, they are, okay? So for behavior to change, the person doing the misbehaving has to experience some negative consequence and learn from it. Just gets tricky, doesn't it? So again, going back to what I said earlier, we want to be careful about deciding whether you're disciplining a behavior, which is a won't, versus an inability to meet your expectations, which is the can't, at least in that moment. Because sometimes we can and sometimes we can't, remember? And be careful not to consequence symptoms that look like behavior. Consequences should fit the misbehavior. So we'll give you some examples of that. I'll show you this video in a second. So a consequence for going to websites on your phone or going to websites on your computer or tablet that you know you're not supposed to go to would result in the loss of the screen for 24 hours, right? A consequence for not wearing your helmet when you ride your bike or your skateboard or something like that on purpose and just not complying with it is you lose access to that activity for 24 hours, okay? So, you know, I get into conversations about consequences all the time, but before you consequence, you should, I suggest that you give your child a chance to back up and redo it. For example, your child is sounding rude and disrespectful to you, and you might want to say, you know what, that sounded really disrespectful. Would you like to try it a different way? And if your child backs down and tries it a different way, that suggests to me that they just were being impulsive and are willing to work through it. So backup and redos can be very helpful before you just jump to consequence and discipline. Another powerful consequence, believe it or not, is just removing your attention from the situation or from the child. Sometimes the stink eye will work. I was doing this with some middle schoolers the other day who were, last couple weeks ago, they were saying really inappropriate stuff at social group. And I just turned around and I gave one of them the stink eye. I didn't say anything. He's like, I'm being stared at. And I just continued to give him the stink eye, and he stopped because he got the message. And that was a consequence, but I didn't have to say anything. So we have to remember that consequences don't have to be huge and they don't have to be powerful. If you find that you are consequencing the same stuff over and over and over again, then we haven't solved the root of the problem. And that gets into a different workshop that I do called Behavior is the Language of Children, but from tonight, you can take away that the root of many problems for kids is either based in anxiety or it's based in attention. And the way to discern that is if you're feeling compassion or confusion around what's happening with your kiddo, it's most likely anxiety based. If you are feeling annoyed or frustrated, it's most likely attention based. And those are the behaviors, right? So your parent gut will kind of tell you which way to go. Shannon, how are we doing on time? Because I don't have a clock. Oh, perfect.
We have about 10 minutes left. Yeah.
And you wanted to do questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to not show this video, but I will send out the link. It's just cute where this principal is hangry and he has a meltdown. And if you haven't seen it, you can just YouTube Principal Wilson's Meltdown. You find it. It's a commercial, actually. But that does bring us to about 10 minutes, like Shannon had asked, for some
Oh,
questions.
yeah.
All right.
So we are having it's a bit of a hot mess with the webinar tonight. It's a bunch of things that I didn't anticipate. So we
Okay.
don't have a chat. So one thing that I wanted to tell everyone is that if you did register for this webinar, I will make sure that you get a copy of the slideshow, the PowerPoint. And I'll also make sure that you have links to both the Peter Pan Center and to Southborough Youth and Family Services. If you want to learn about anything that we have coming up, make sure that you're following us on Facebook. But what I do want to give a shot to is that I think we have the opportunity to be able to have people raise their hands and that they can actually ask questions.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if anybody has any questions.
I'm looking for the little hands just to see.
Yeah. So if anybody has a question, you can raise your hand. So that's on the bottom of your screen. Oh, Andrea has a question. Now I have to find Andrea.
Oh,
Hey,
look,
Andrea.
there's Andrea. Okay. This
Hey,
works.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, how about that? Okay. So you talked about kids who respond to kind of reward systems and kids who don't. So right now I have one of each. I have a kid who responds like great to external rewards and a kid who's very like stressed out by external reward systems,
Mhm.
but also wildly jealous of the kid who wants the external rewards.
Okay.
And that's been something that's been sort of happening in my family very recently. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts or suggestions for how to navigate that. We've tried to sort of put in some arbitrary rewards for her, and I just feel like it's causing more stress than
Is
it's
she
worth.
feeling stressed because she feels like she's not earning them, or?
Yeah, like she's a kid who's very internally motivated, and so like something external just becomes a thing to miss. And so like if she doesn't get it, then she just gets very it's a huge meltdown situation. And so whereas her brother is like very motivated by it and isn't like he can miss something and not be totally thrown off by it and just feels great about getting it.
Are there any takeaways involved, or is it just if you earned it, you get it?
No takeaways,
Okay.
just positive. Yeah.
Because takeaways can stress kids out too, right? Because
Yep.
yeah, because then they feel like it's just self-defeating. Have you ever tried a scenario where they're earning something together?
That we have not, no.
So I did that with my two, where I put them together because one of the things I was trying to work on is them getting along. So, so what I did is they had tokens, and they wanted an allowance. They were like a little bit older. They wanted an allowance, and I put 15 white tokens in a jar, and they got $15 a week. And if they, now that's had a little takeaway because I just tried it and it worked for them. But if they weren't working together well, I'd throw a red one in, subtract 50 cents. If they did something extra nice, they'd get a blue one, which was $1, right? So they could earn more money by getting along. But what I found them doing was working together. So I think my point is, if you haven't tried what are you trying to motivate them to do, Andrea?
Yeah, so on one, it's the motivation is around school behavior, and so it's based on like a sheet that comes home from school. The other one doesn't have earn systems right now, so it's just been like trying to find something that makes sense for her. So right now it's about getting ready quickly in the morning.
So it sounds like she doesn't even really need one. You're just trying to provide.
It is just, I mean, there's lots of things with her that are useful to kind of try to create, but I mean, but again, she's got lots of other systems for that, and so it's trying almost to like pigeonhole something that doesn't really work just because of the jealousy. And I'm almost wondering if maybe hearing myself say it, I just need to deal with the jealousy instead and
Well,
not try
there's
to like
that
make this work.
part, but I guess I would go back a little bit and say, can your sons, because it's school-based behavior, why aren't those rewards just simply happening at school?
They have not been able to find something that is motivating for him at school.
Oh, so
Yeah.
they send it home to you and you do it. Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Gotcha. But it's working.
Yes.
So how do you work with sibling jealousy, right? There's, it's really kind of everybody gets, so that kind of works on, there's a slide that I've done in another presentation called Planets Fair and Equal. Okay. So on Planet Equal, which I think is what you're trying to do,
Yeah.
everyone gets exactly the same thing. Where Planet Fair, everybody gets what they need. And so it may be that she doesn't need the same type of thing that he needs, and she's feeling jealous about that because she doesn't feel it's fair. But you can try to maybe approach that conversation about fair and equal. Like if you guys were totally equal, you'd both have to ski, you'd both only be able to have a cat, and you'd both only be able to wear blue.
Yeah.
Right? Where fair is everybody gets what they need. Is she the older?
Yes.
Yeah. And how old is she?
She's 10.
Oh, she's also getting tweeny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always
That's a
fun.
delight.
And no, no, it isn't. So I guess my best advice would be either, I would have a conversation with her. I would sit down and I would have what's called a collaborative problem solving conversation with her, that you understand that she really would like to have some sort of a reward system like her brother, or it's very frustrating that her brother has one and it doesn't work as well for her, and empathize with that and say, the problem from the mom perspective is that, you're unsure of what to do to help her with this, or should you even, have one? And then really do a brainstorm with her about what makes sense, because kids can usually come up with some really good ideas given the opportunity and the empathy and I hear you, but I don't know what to do about it. Help me out here.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. That's fair. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. We have another question.
Samantha.
Yeah.
I know Samantha. Hi, Samantha.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. My question is actually not about the child that you know.
Okay.
The brother. So I'm just curious. So at home, our son exhibits a lot of the anxious behaviors that you mentioned, like being inflexible, being easily upset, like a perfectionist, and like the attention seeking, like annoying behaviors that you talked about. At school, he's like your role model child. I know we're his safe place and all of that good stuff.
Right.
But the contrast is huge. Like we go into his conference and they have never, like every single year since he was 3 years old, we'll go into his teacher conference and he's a role model. He is so kind. He's so everything. At home, he's like a completely opposite child. And I know people say that in some ways is very normal, but I feel like the contrast between the two is big. And it's like to the point where like at home, I'm like, I would totally think he has ADD, or I would totally think he has some major anxiety, but the fact that they don't see it at all at school is just baffling to me.
It's called masking.
Yes.
Okay.
But
I know. So I have one, because his fourth grade teacher called me to tell me what a wonderful kid I had. And I'm like, that is not the kid that lives in my house. So I do not know who you're talking about. So I have lived it, Samantha. I know. So what's up with these guys, believe it or not, is that they wrap it together so tight when they're in public, right? They mask it, because my older son will speak about it now. He's 37 and talks about how exhausting that is, right?
Sure.
And then they get home, and this doesn't make it any easier or fair to you. They get home and it's called after school restraint collapse. And they let their families have everything that they've held all day. The tricky part of ADHD, if that's kind of what we're looking at, is if he's motivated, so attention stuff, don't think of it as a deficit of attention. Think of it as a deficit of motivation to what's going on. So if he really enjoys school and he's motivated and loves it, he's going to do good. Okay. And if there's things in that are not preferred or is not as motivating to him, you're going to see the symptomology the symptom stuff happen. So, right. And it's frustrating because parents will say, my kid can't possibly have ADD. He can do his Legos for 18 hours at a time. Yes, because he's motivated. But then also the flip side of that is you get hyper focused on things, which is another trait of ADHD kids. So it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, Samantha, it sounds to me like we haven't teased out if there is anything like that going on, because he sounds to me like a kid that probably is not typical, but is presenting typical at school, and you're getting the aftermath of it.
Now, yes, that's exactly what's happening. But
Yeah.
so what do you do with that?
You test it. You assess
Wow.
it, evaluate it, and test it. Outside of school,
Okay.
if you can. So something called a neuropsychological evaluation.
Yes, very familiar.
Okay. So, and if he hasn't had one, and if it's covered, I'd highly recommend you pursue that, because it may not turn up at school. But I think, kind of based on what you're telling me, you use the word normal, like I know it's supposed to be normal. It doesn't sound like you're having a typical parenting experience. Let me just say it that way. And if you know there's more to his story, you are the expert on him.
Okay. I'm talking to somebody. Here they come.
Here they come.
I was like, I just escaped for 2 seconds to ask the question. Okay. So, well, and I actually literally just said that to my mom the other day. I was like, if it was affecting school, I would say, let's test him like we have with the other. But I just don't know the reason for, I guess I wasn't sure if there was a reason for even going through that. If
Yes,
it's not affecting school.
I think there is, because it's affecting life.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Question. Thank you.
And Sydney's saying hi to you.
Hello.
And I'm going to get off because now they're all here.
Okay.
We probably have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions.
Okay.
Anybody has any questions?
All right.
Going once, going twice.
Cool. Well, I hope it was helpful and you got a little nugget here and there.
Fantastic, as
Good.
always.
Good.
Fantastic.
So
So
tomorrow morning, I will zap out the PowerPoint to Shannon and she can forward it to all of you and you'll have everything. So I hope you didn't feel like you had to scratch a million notes. And then you can watch the principal have a meltdown. That'll be fun.
that will be awesome. Well, thank you again, Donna. This was
Thanks,
great.
Jane. Thanks for inviting
And
me.
yeah, thank you for coming. And again, a thank you to the Southborough Community Fund for making this possible tonight. And please follow us to figure out what we're doing next, because we always have something going on. So have a great night and be well. Thank you.
Thank you.